The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to PKA Technologies Tech Talk. I'm David Singer, the Director of Marketing here at PKA, and I'll be the moderator during today's presentation. Thank you for giving up your lunch hour and joining us, and I hope that you find this material interesting and informative. Just to let you know, this call is being recorded, and following the presentation, we'll provide you with a link to a copy of the slides and to the recording. Many of you are facing the challenge of students using multiple computing devices in the classroom. While this is a positive development on instruction, it should be done in a way that still allows the teacher to control the room while giving them the ability to encourage collaboration and make more productive use of class time. Hewlett-Packard's Classroom Manager is a solution that does that and much more. Today, we're fortunate to have Charlie Radman from Hewlett-Packard join us. Charlie is a veteran within the software and education marketplace. He'll give us background and a working demonstration of HP's Classroom Manager, which is a package designed to allow you to take control of your classroom environment. And as I make Charlie the presenter, just one last bit of housekeeping. This is going to be an interactive presentation. So at any time you have a question, either submit a question in the upper right hand corner of your screen or raise your hand, your virtual hand, and we'll open your line so you could ask your question. With that out of the way, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Charlie at this time.
And thank you, David. And hopefully you can see my screen at this moment.
Yes, I see it.
Okay. And is there, apologize, is there a way to minimize this control bar?
No one else should see your control bar.
Okay, thank you so much. So I appreciate everyone's time today. As David said, I am from Hewlett-Packard. My job is actually global business development, and that's just a really fancy title of saying I fly around the world a lot and spend a tremendous amount of time with schools and with partners around the world. And I really want to talk to you today about HP Classroom Manager, the solution that we have come up with to try and make bringing devices into a classroom much easier. And so we'll talk about what HP Classroom Manager is, what value it is for schools to be able to use it, and then we'll actually go into a functioning demo. And then as we go through this, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask the questions. So for us, we see devices going in the classroom all the time. HP, obviously, a large hardware manufacturer. But what I've found and what we have found is when you go into a lot of schools, the devices actually either aren't being used a lot, aren't being used effectively, or in some cases, the devices are sitting on a shelf in the back of the room. And we want to make sure that teachers feel comfortable around having those devices in the classroom. The number one concern, obviously, from teachers is what are the kids doing with the device while I'm up here trying to teach, and is that device going to turn out to be more of a distraction than an enhancement to the education experience? So first and foremost, we want to make sure that teachers see the value of having devices in the classroom, and we really put control in the hands of the teachers on when and how those devices are actually used. So for us, we see it as not only controlling devices, though, we want to make sure those devices actually enhance the education experience by allowing the teacher to do things like real-time formative assessment. So teachers can actually use it to evaluate comprehension in real time. So they can administer quizzes and tests and do quick surveys throughout the class. They can actually track keywords in real time as the student is typing. And of course, they can record results both for the class, how is the class doing, but also how is the individual student doing and what progress is the individual student making. We encourage collaboration through the tool by distributing and collecting out homework assignments or learning guides, and you can do that electronically. So instead of relying on email or a share folder or a SharePoint to get that information, you can actually distribute the files electronically through the actual application. You can set up chat groups on specific topics, and then let the students join the chat groups and collaborate, share ideas back and forth with each other. All of these chat groups are monitored automatically by the software itself, but also monitored by the teacher. And the teacher can jump in and out of different chat groups, throwing out ideas and spawning different thought topics, keeping the conversation going, but again allowing the students to collaborate with each other. And there's an interactive virtual whiteboard that the students share either across the entire class, or you can set students up into groups and give each individual group a whiteboard to come up with a solution. Or you can even assign each individual student a whiteboard and let them work on a solution to a problem. It could be a math problem, draw out what this graph you expect it to look like is. It could be a workflow, things like that. But it allows the students to get very creative in an environment that they're very familiar with. And then, again, first and foremost, it's around directing student attention. So it's determining when and how those devices are used. So you can do website and application restrictions based on the class, based on the day, based on the lesson. So think of it as a hierarchical situation where your school may allow 100 websites to be accessed, for an example. But in your math class, you want to have access to just one website. You don't want that student off visiting some other web pages that may be allowed but are not applicable to your lesson. You can say, for today's lesson, you have access to one particular website. For tomorrow's lesson, it may be an entirely different website. And certainly from subject to subject, lesson to lesson, that website can change. So in math, it may be one website. In history or in French class, it may be an entirely different website. But it's really controlling at a more granular level what websites you have access to. The same thing goes for applications. So you can actually control which applications the student can launch or run during the class. And if they're running an application, such as a game that you may have allowed them to install, Minecraft, #1 game in education at the moment, if they've got that running, you can actually remote shut it down so it's not a distraction during your class. You can also remote launch websites and remote launch applications. So instead of putting up a URL up on the board or up on the screen and then asking all of the students to get to that URL, and then waiting, because we know that that can take quite some time, you can actually remote launch that website, getting all of the students there very quickly so that you can continue to move on with the lesson. Same thing for an application. If you're trying to get them, again as a math example, into a calc emulator software and you're trying to show them how to type in the equation so it brings up the proper graph, you can actually remote launch that application on the student's device, so you're again not having to wait for them to get there. And of course, during lecture time periods, you can actually lock down the device, lock the screen down, lock the mouse and keyboard down, so they can't actually be using the device while you're up trying to lecture. So again, it's really trying to make sure the teacher feels comfortable having those devices in the class and then using those devices to actually improve the education experience. If you look at the middle part of this slide, we're a peer-to-peer application. That means that there's a client that sits and runs on the teacher machine, and then there's a client that sits and runs on the student machine. For teachers today, the application will work on both a Windows device, Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1. When Windows 10 comes out, it'll automatically work on Windows 10. But it'll also work now on a Chromebook. So Chromebooks are very popular in the market. So we actually have a teacher component that will actually run on a Chromebook as well. And then for the students, that student environment can actually be mixed. So you can have Windows devices, you can have Android devices, you can have Chromebooks as well as iPads and the Mac operating system. And so those students can actually be a mixed environment. So if your school does BYOD, bring your own device, where each student, brings an approved device into the class, you could actually support that. But also, if you're in the middle of a transition, perhaps you're transitioning from older Windows units to new Chromebooks, or you're transitioning from older Chromebooks to the new Windows Stream product, you would be able to use the licenses. You would be able to support a mixed environment from the teacher side of the equation. And then on the right-hand side, just so you know, we have an IT component as well. So for a lot of schools, they're just now getting into having devices in the school. We actually offer an IT console. It's called the Tech Console, and you can do things like monitor activity. So how often are devices being used? What kind of resources are the devices using? What kind of bandwidth are the devices using? You can also use it to deploy out and update software. That's limited right now to the Windows side, but you could actually use it instead of using, let's say, SCCM, which is a kind of a remote push or remote deployment tool. This is a very similar application. So any device running HP Classroom Manager, any student device out there, you can actually push out software packages and remote install them and remote deploy them. You can set security and firewall settings and antivirus settings, and you can even use it for doing PC inventory and asset tracking. So if you're not tracking your assets and keeping a PC inventory of what PC gets assigned to someone, you can actually do that through the tool itself automatically. And then the Tech Console makes it very easy to support your environment. So you can send out a message to an individual teacher if they're having a problem, and you can converse back and forth with that teacher. Or you can send out a message to all of the teachers or to everyone, teachers and students, to let them know, hey, I just was made aware that the Verizon connection to the internet went down, and we're right now working on that, but be aware of that. Or if you know that there's going to be some maintenance going to happen, at the bottom of the hour, you can remind teachers of that so that they're not logging calls back to the IT room, that something has gone down. So again, it makes it very easy to support the environment. You can even use the Tech Console to do a remote session into both student systems as well as teacher systems to try to remotely resolve problems, so those devices and that student or that teacher doesn't have to leave the classroom to bring the device down to your office. So the customer needs and the value propositions that we're trying to meet, first and foremost, we see these are the four basic stakeholders within education. Obviously for the students, we want to keep them focused on the content. That's why they're there. We also want to make it very easy for them to ask for help. We all know that there are students who kind of sit on the fringes, right? They sit in the back, they sit on the sides. Usually they're struggling, they don't participate very often in class, and they certainly don't raise their hand and say, I don't understand something. And studies have shown the reason they don't ask for help is they don't want everyone else in the class to know that they don't understand something. But through our tool, we actually give students the capability of throwing a lifeline and asking for help in a very private and secure way. And we've actually done studies with our application of students who were failing, and over a semester, moving from being an F student, a failing student, now moving up to being a C, low C and a high D student. So I'm not going to say it turns them into A students, because that doesn't happen overnight, but it does give them the capability of asking for assistance in a very private and secure way. For IT managers, we want it to be very, very easy to install and configure, and it is. Right out of the box, it's got a default classroom that's already set up that you can use. It can be immediately launched and within about 3 minutes activated and working on a kind of a work group environment. Or you can get very complex depending on your environment. So if your environment has multiple VLANs where your teacher's on one VLAN and your students are on a separate VLAN and you need to bridge those, we actually have a component called a gateway that allows you to do that. And you can also integrate it into Active Directory, so that you can actually have group policies, push down all of the custom configuration, all of the licensing, all of the class schedules can actually be pushed down through group policies. And we actually have the templates that go with the software that already come embedded into the software that you can use and start to use Active Directory. So it all depends on your environment, but we can get very simple and we can also get very complex. For teachers, we obviously want to be able to harness that technology and not compete with it. Again, we don't want the devices to be a distraction. Also, we want to keep the students focused and engaged throughout the class. And then for administrators, those are usually the people who cut the check, right? They're the ones that authorize the funds ultimately, and they need to see a return on investment. And so we want to make sure that the administrators have the capability of tracking to see how often the software is being used, how the devices are being used, get reports out to show that students are actually using the websites and applications that you've invested in, so they can actually see a return on investment. Obviously, the ultimate return is improved scores, scores or maintaining scores, within testing and so forth. But also you want to make sure that they're not just buying devices and those devices are sitting in the back of the room. So you want to see some kind of a return on investment. So we try to give that to administrators. So how do we stack up against the competition? And oftentimes I get asked, why do I show this? But I think it's really important because A, we know we're not the only ones in the market. There are a lot of players that do classroom management, but I want to show how we kind of differentiate ourselves and why we believe we're better in the market on this. So from a feature set point of view, we offer the most features across the most operating systems of all the top competitors in the market. And it's not just a feature count. I'm not saying, hey, we have 105 features and the next person has 101. It's not like that. It's the actual features that matter in education. The ability to do things like real-time formative assessment, the ability to keep students engaged through different types of question and answer modes, and the ability to monitor student screens as they're working on their assignments. So that's obviously very key in our world. I'm sure the people on this call are pretty much concerned with English from a localization point of view. We as HP see this as a global initiative that we're working on, and right now our application is localized in 24 different languages, and it's deployed in almost every country now in the world. And we see the same concerns whether it's in Hackensack, New Jersey, or we see the same concerns in Beijing, China, all with what are devices doing in the classroom and how can students use them better and how can students or teachers control those devices. From an MSRP perspective, if you understand nothing more on this presentation than our licensing model, it's very unique. So we license by device. You basically buy a bank of licenses. So an example is you would buy 100 licenses for your environment, and that would cover your teachers and your students, maybe your IT help desk, a gateway server if you have to bridge multiple VLANs. But you basically then own HP Classroom Manager for that number of licenses. You can move those licenses around, so if devices die and you need to replace a device, if a device goes missing, you can actually move that license from one device to another just as long as you don't exceed your bank. And the other thing is you own the software. It's a perpetual license. You do not have to buy an annual subscription to be able to use the software, and you're also entitled to all updates to that software for the life of that software without having to buy a subscription contract or a maintenance contract. Now, this completely sets us apart from every other major competitor in the market. We don't see that it's advantageous to a school to have to outlay money every year to be able to use a piece of software. So we see this as, let's get into the market, let's have you use the software. We don't need to milk you for money every year just to continue to use it. So you're entitled to all updates for free for the life of the version of software. And we keep our versions around, just as an example, for about 2 to 3 years. So the version that we're on right now, version 11, we've had around for a little over 2.5 years now. We still have another 9 to 12 months of version 11. And we're going to have additional enhancements and additional features that we put into it. And then eventually we're going to roll to version 12. And then when we roll to the next version, so when we roll to version 12, every existing customer has the capability to either stay on the existing version, version 11, and be able to use it if that's what they want to do. And again, they're not forced to upgrade. Or if they want to upgrade, we're offering upgrade packages for $2 per device. And then you own version 12. And then you'll own version 12 for the life of that version and be entitled to all updates for that version as well. So we, again, see this as very key differentiation between all the other competitors in the market. And then certainly from a BYOD perspective, we support, again, the most operating systems across the most devices. So we support Android and Windows, Chromebooks, and both iOS and the Mac operating system. In fact, the only operating system right now that we're not supporting or planning to support is the Linux operating system. And primarily that's because we see a large diminishing of Linux in education at the moment. I think Chromebooks actually came in whatever market Linux had, Chromebooks kind of consumed that because of the low price point. So here's a backwards-looking look at our investment. So just so you understand that even when we release a piece of software, we continue to enhance it throughout the life of the version of software. So a little over a year and a half ago, we came out with our first Android student. And I'll be honest, it only worked on HP Android devices. And so we know we're not the #1 Android manufacturer in the world. We wish we were, but we're not. And so we went out to all of our competitors, and we were able to get signed packages from them so that we could offer the exact same features on a Samsung and on a ASUS and an Acer device, just like we would offer on an HP Android device. And that came out in May of last year. We support a full thin client environment, so if you're using thin clients in a terminal services environment or a Citrix environment with a Zen app as an example, we support that kind of a configuration. We came out with our first Chrome student in February of last year, and we came out with our iOS student in June of last year. So we continue to enhance the software. Another recent enhancement that we released is the Chrome Teacher, which came out just about 5 weeks ago, and we already have a larger number of schools running the Chrome Teacher now. So the interesting thing about this, or the unique thing about this for us, is that when you buy a bank of licenses, and again, if you're moving from one kind of device to another, you're moving from Chrome to Android, or you're moving from Windows to something else, you can actually move those licenses around. As long as you don't exceed the bank that you've purchased, you can move those licenses as often as you need to. And then the other thing is obviously you can add to those licenses. So as you add devices, as you add students, you can actually add additional licenses to your bundle. Okay, last but not least, got 2 more slides, and then I actually want to get into a demo of the application. This shows you kind of the functionality by operating systems. I want to be very clear because we don't want any ambiguity here, but not every operating system offers the same capabilities to software vendors like us that they don't all match. So certainly within a Windows operating environment, Windows operating system, we have the most control. We can do the most things within Windows. And certainly all of the features you're going to see today are available on the Windows side. Thin clients, very close to that, obviously, because they predominantly run within a pseudo or virtual Windows environment. You'll have most of the same features within a thin client. Chrome, interestingly enough, is coming very close now to Windows. In fact, Chrome has got some additional enhancements on their roadmap from an operating system point of view that's going to almost put them on par with Windows over the next 9 to 12 months. And so very exciting of what you can do on the Chrome side. Android's getting pretty close as well. They're exposing a little bit more in their APIs on what we can do on their device. The other one that's kind of lagging behind right now is the iOS operating system. And that's predominantly because of the way Apple has designed iOS. There's this thing called sandboxing, which just basically is a fancy way of saying that my application can only work within its own sandbox, and it can't interact with anybody else's sandbox or their application. And that's by design, and we understand that. So we offer the most capability that you can offer on an Apple device. It's just when you compare that back to the Windows side, it is obviously going to be less. And again, that's by design of Apple and how they've designed out the iOS operating system. Okay, last but not least, last slide, and then I'll actually go into a demo, is how do you get access to HP Classroom Manager? So as you go through this, and as you see Classroom Manager today, there's a couple of different ways of having access. HP recently announced in January of this year 3 very exciting education-specific devices. So these are devices that were designed for education. They're ruggedized. They have a very long battery life to be able to use in education. There's a laptop called the Pro 11E. There is a tablet, which is a 10.1-inch Windows tablet, and then there's the same exact tablet, 10.1-inch, but it's an Android tablet, same exact hardware, but an Android tablet. And HP Classroom Manager comes pre-installed for the student and pre-licensed for the student on those devices. So when you buy one of those devices, you automatically get it as part of a larger education software offering that we call HP School Pack. But the Classroom Manager component is part of that offering. You can also obviously buy it and install it as a separate piece of application. We will run on any Windows device. So if you don't have HP hardware in your facility, but yet you would like to run HP Classroom Manager and you're running Dell's as an example, certainly you can buy and use HP Classroom Manager in that environment. And you can go to our website. It's www.hp.com/go/HP Classroom Manager. You can download a trial version. You can see videos of how to do different features. You can read all of our literature out there. But then when you download a trial version, if you want to try it before you buy it, you can actually install it on up to 40 devices at the same time, and you can actually use it for 30 days. Full functionality, so it's not like a light version. We want you to experience the full functionality of the software. And again, it's completely available as a standalone product. So that being said, I'm going to go into a virtual machine here that will show you what's available on our software from the teacher side of the equation. Then also I'll show you how it looks on the student side. So this is the teacher console. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I've been waiting to ask you a question that had come in, and I thought this was a good time to at least throw the question out there for you to think about as you go through the demo. The question I have is, can you limit students from going into the settings page of an iPad?
You cannot do that yet today. So you cannot prohibit them because you can't restrict them from accessing basically another app, and settings is basically an app today. Now there is other software called MDM, or mobile device management software, that you can use to restrict students. Basically, it's a separate piece of software that's always kind of running under the hood. It's sometimes quite expensive, I'll be honest with you, but there is other software that does MDM. We're just not, in our class with iOS, not able to do that today.
Okay, thanks for letting me interrupt.
Does that answer your question?
I think it does answer the question.
Oh, not a problem. Okay. And if anyone else has any other questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt, because we certainly, can take this conversation down multiple different paths. So that being said, this is the teacher console, or the tutor console that ships, and it's a client application that sits resident on the teacher's machine. And for the demo today, I'm going to be a middle school or a high school math teacher. But there's a couple of different ways you can actually configure the software. One is if the teacher moves from room to room, or at least subject to subject, you can actually set up different rooms in the software based on the subject you're teaching. So, in kind of middle school and high school, certainly, you may start the day with algebra, go to geometry after that, have trigonometry after lunch. So you select which class you're supposed to be in. In kind of the grade schools, though, where the devices and the students and the teacher all stay in the same room throughout the day, you can actually just hard code a single room. So it could be like 4th grade, room 210, and then as soon as you turn on your machine, and as soon as the teacher or the students turn on their machine, they automatically join together, and they don't actually have to do anything other than just start up the machine, and then they join right into class. If the students are mobile, though, and they're going from room to room, and let's say it's a true one-to-one environment where they take their tablet or laptop with them from one device or from one room to another, they select which room they're supposed to be in or what subject they're supposed to be in. So maybe for a student, first period is French class, second period may be history, third period may be chemistry, fourth period may be when they join trigonometry. And it's that joining of a room that the teacher has already started really sets up a secure relationship, a secure communication path between the teacher and the student. And that's really important for a couple of reasons. Primarily, it's important from a privacy point of view, right? We want to make sure any information that's shared between the teacher and his or her students is kept in a very private and secure fashion. So if you're using things like social security numbers as a student identifier, which a lot of schools do these days, that would obviously be kept and encrypted in a secure fashion. But the other reason is around bandwidth. Right? We want to make sure that we're not overwhelming the bandwidth of the school, especially when you have 25, 30, 40 classrooms working at the same time with 40 students in every class. You don't want to be sending out traffic from one teacher to every student in the entire school. We want the traffic to only go to the students in his or her class. And so by setting up this secure relationship, make sure that that's what happens. And so we're not overwhelming the network. We're not broadcasting out and then taking down your entire network performance. So it's the secure communication where the teacher starts a class and the student joins the class, sets up that relationship. And then actually a secure key gets passed back and forth. So by default, we ship with a classroom called eval, and if you download the software and try it out, it's got this eval classroom, so that's what I'm going to use. So I'll select it, and then I'm going to click on OK, and it's going to go out and it's going to search for any computers that are supposed to be in my eval classroom. And I have a couple of computers sitting out there that are in the eval classroom. And so it's going to find one that's actually a virtual machine that's running on my system. It's actually going to find another one, which is in our lab, which is on the same network. So we don't actually physically have to be sitting in the same place. My lab is 2 buildings across and 3 floors up from where I am right at the moment. And it just happens to be on the same network, and it's listening at the same time. So I'm able to, find devices that are on different subnets. If I have a gateway, I'm able to find devices within the same network that are supposed to join my class. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask those students to register. And really what registration is doing is it's linking a student to a device. Because really at the end of the day, we want to track students' performance and progress by how they're doing every day, regardless of what device they're using. So if it's a classroom situation where you have tablets or notebooks that you put into a charging card at the end of every class, and when a student comes in the next day, they may not grab the same tablet or notebook, what we really want to do is link that student back to that device so that we can continue to track that student's progress regardless of what device they're using. Now, if they use the same device every single day, it can actually remember that, and then it's just a way of taking attendance, basically, at the beginning of every class. And you get to dictate what kind of information you would like to gather from the students. So by default, we ask for first name, last name, student ID, but you can create a couple of customized fields there as well. You can even ask for their login or username as a way of tracking them. But you ask them to register. And when you ask them to register, what's going to happen is on their screen, they get a pop-up. And they get this pop-up that asks them to type in some basic information. So again, I'm going to actually pretend to be the student here. And this would be my student ID and my name. But now I've linked in to HP Classroom Manager. And now I'm part of the class. And you'll see up here there's a little toolbar running at the top. And that's really all of the real estate by default that we take up on the student screen. Obviously, again, we don't want to be a distraction to the student either. We just want to be able to allow the teacher to manage and use that device to better improve the education experience. So once the student has registered, you'll see that a name shows up and it comes up, and obviously the other student hasn't registered, and at any point they can come back and register down the road. So if the device is there, they've stepped away for a moment, they didn't do it in the amount of time before class got started, they can actually add themselves at any point and log in with their registration. But now you have a way of saving what students are using which devices. And you can actually save this as a file, an actual flat file, to where you can, again, use it for asset tracking, PC tracking as you've handed out devices. There are several systems that you can actually import in this CSV file and have it be the way you take attendance. So if you're using things like Moodle or Blackboard, you can actually import it in and then take attendance into those learning management systems instead of having the teacher have multiple applications that they have to start and use at the beginning of every class. So you can save that out, and then once you've saved that, now you have a record of who's using those devices. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. And this then shows you your classroom. So you can imagine here that this is the 20 to 30 to 40 students that you have in your class, and you can arrange them any way you want. So you can arrange them so they're showing up just like they're seated in your class. If they have seating assignments, so when you look down and you look up, you know exactly where the student is. You can let the system break them up into groups. Let's say you have 32 students in the class and you want to break them into groups of 4 automatically. You don't want to set up the groups, but you'll have the software to do that. You can do that. You can say, I want 8 groups of 4 students, and it'll actually break them up and allow them to collaborate together and start to share information back and forth. And of course, anything that's shared, anything that's done, student to student, student to teacher, there's a record of that. And so you can go back and review that if you need to. So this is one way of looking at the class. The other way is looking at their details, and details is actually kind of important for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, you see which version of the software they're running and what platform they're running it on. But the more important day-to-day use of looking at details is around their battery life, especially if you're in a tablet or a laptop environment. So if you know at the bottom of the hour you have a test coming up, it may be park testing, it may be other tests that the students need to take, you're going to want to obviously look at the details ahead of time and say, does all of my students have enough battery power to make it through the test? Because you don't want that system dying halfway through the test and that being an excuse for why they either failed the test or couldn't complete the test. So you can actually come in here and see the status of the battery life on any device in the class. And so you'll actually see here, and I purposely have this, you'll actually see here where I have one device that its battery is reporting as 0. It's actually because I took the battery out, but it actually tells you that there's a problem with that device. But you would be able to mouse over any system that's running on battery power and then be able to tell how much battery is left. So again, if you're going to create a test, you're going to push out a test, or you have something else that's going to be a requirement, you're going to know that ahead of time. Does the student have enough battery power to make it through this lesson today? So really important way of being able to manage devices in the classroom. The other way of looking at devices is around being able to get a thumbnail screenshot of their device. And so what this is instead of streaming 35 desktops back to the teacher during every class in real time, what we're actually doing is we're doing a thumbnail screen capture from the device every 1.5 to 2 seconds, and then sending that back to the teacher so that you can kind of see what's going on in that student screen. And certainly that's not going to change a lot in every 1.5 seconds. But let's say something does catch your eye and you want to get a better look at it. All you have to do is mouse over that screen. Now it's going to zoom that out, and this is actually going to increase the refresh rate of how often we capture that thumbnail. So now instead of doing it every 1.5 seconds, it's going to be every 0.5 second to every second that we're going to get a thumbnail capture from that student's device. And then let's say that they're completely off in the weeds, they're playing around, you need to get them back on track. What you can do is you can actually double click on their screen, and now what you've done is you've taken over full remote control of their device. So now you can actually come in and get them back on track. You control, along with them by default, the mouse and the keyboards. You can type, they can type. You kind of get them back to where they're supposed to be. There's other ways of actually taking remote control of the device as well. You can actually come in under watch mode or stealth mode. So if you see something that's pretty disturbing or you need to actually grab some information off that student's device, you can do that without them knowing that you're there in watch mode. And then obviously if you need to lock them out of the device, they're playing around, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or for whatever reason you need to lock them out so you have control of the mouse and the keyboard, you can actually take over full control of the device remotely, get them back on track, solve whatever problem happens to be the issue, and then you can relinquish control back to the students. So you have that kind of capability of being able to do that and controlling how they use those devices, in the classroom. And then when you're done, all you have to do is close out of this, and you can just close out the window. Now, I do apologize because of the menus in my way for a moment. I do have to try to move this menu so I can close out. But you can actually close out of the screen and then get back to where you're supposed to be. And so when you close out, it takes you back into the screen, seeing all the student screens. So it's a very easy way of being able to manage devices in the classroom. So think about how a standard class kind of works. You can show content. So if you have, something on a lesson, you want to show out your desktop to all the students, you can do that. You can actually play a video, remote play a video onto the student screens. You can even record a lesson ahead of time, or record a lesson and then allow students to play it back on their own. So let's say they're going to be gone. You have students who are in sports, and you're going to have a large number of your students gone, on a sports activity. But you want to obviously keep going with your lesson. You can actually record that lesson as you're doing it and then save that as a file that then the student can play later on their own. Or let's say you plan to be gone on Friday and you have a substitute or a proctor come in. You can actually come in and allow the substitute to play out your lesson for you on the student devices. You can also just share an application. So if I don't want to share my entire desktop because I have other things going on, I don't want the students to be able to see it, but I do want them to be able to see my PowerPoint slide or a particular lesson. Let's say it's a science class and you have SparkView by Pasco running and you want to show an experiment. You can just show out that application out to the rest of the students. You can also exhibit out a student application, or a student desktop rather, to the rest of the students in the class. So if, you know, Charlie is the student, does a really good job, and you want to show out, you know, something that he's come up with, you can actually show out his desktop out to the rest of the class as well. So there's the capability of being able to do that and then show that information to the class environment. You can do a file transfer. Again, like as I mentioned, you can send and collect homework. So if I wanted to send some homework out, or I wanted to send a study guide as an example, this would be for a science lesson, you know, of how water refracts light, which causes rainbow coloring to happen. You can actually have a study guide out there, or a lesson that you want to push out. You find it, and then you determine where you want to place it on the student's device. So by default, you know, on a Windows system, it's going to place it on the desktop, but you can actually push that out, and then it's going to tell you that it's been successful or not. So now you actually have a record of this. So a student can't come to you later on and say, well, I didn't get that. You have a record that they did. And again, it's not relying on email. It's not relying on them going to a share folder or a SharePoint to pull it. So you're actually pushing it right down to their system. You can capture homework the exact same way. You capture it from them. You tell them where to place it. You capture it off their device, and then it stores it on the teacher system under the student's name. Or if you have a network location, you can actually point it to the network location and store it under the student's name on the network location. So, you know, different ways of being able to use the software without relying on email or other ways of transferring information. And then when it's lecture time period, usually there's always a lecture time period that you go through in a class. When it's lecture time period, you want to lock down their device, right? Because you want all eyes forward up on the students. And so when you lock the device down, they can't obviously use the device. And what's really interesting with this is specifically on a Windows device and on a Chrome device, it remembers the last state it was in. So if a student gets really kind of wise and says, I'm going to exit out of the program, or I'm going to reboot the machine, right? So I'm going to hold down the power button for 10 seconds until the machine reboots. What will actually happen is the machine will reboot as normal. It'll come back up into Windows or come back up into Chrome. As soon as the student signs in on that device, it's immediately going to go right back into the class they were last in, and it's going to immediately go right back into that locked state that they were last in. So a student can't get around this when you've locked down the device. So you're lecturing, you've locked down the device, they're paying attention. Now you can unlock the device when it's time to actually work on the system. You also have the capability of blanking out their screen. So if you need to send them a message, or if there's other reasons you want to blank out their screen so they don't even see the lock, they just see absolutely nothing but a message from you, you have that capability as well. Additional features that we offer are a language lab capability. So imagine using the exact same devices that you're using in history, you're using in science, in your language lab. So you're teaching a foreign language. You can actually push out the audio file, play it through the device. The student uses their headphones to listen to the language lesson. They use their microphone to repeat the language lesson. You know, as you go through German or French or Spanish, you usually end up repeating phrases and words. And then the teacher themselves uses their own device, their own headphones and their own microphone to listen to each individual student. They can record one student or multiple students at the same time, and then they can use their own microphone to talk back and forth with the student. So if the student didn't conjugate the verb properly, they can actually explain that and give them an example. So it's just a way of being able to use the same devices as you move, from science into English, also in language lab. We have a lot of schools, by the way, who use this for remedial reading lessons. So where the lesson itself is either on the screen or it's a book that they're reading, but they're reading it into the computer, and then the teacher is able to monitor students, multiple students in like a remedial reading lab, to where they can actually record them, monitor them, and then go back and work with them if they see that they're struggling on certain words or certain topics. Another feature we offer is question and answer. We know if we keep students engaged throughout the class, they're going to have a better experience. And by keeping them engaged, oftentimes you need to make it fun, right? You need to make it lighthearted. And so we do things like question and answer mode or game show mode. So you can do first to answer, which is I am the teacher. I'm going to go into first to answer mode. I'm going to ask a question. Whoever presses their space bar first or whoever presses the red button on their tablet first, you're going to buzz in, and you actually hear a buzzer when you turn the audio on. And then you see if they know the answer. And if they do, you can give them a star. If they don't, you can take a star away from them or you can exclude them from the next round. But it's a way of making it fun and interactive. You can do enter and answer as well, to where I'm the teacher. I'm going to type out whatever the answer is first, and then it's whoever types in the answer correctly that matches mine first will automatically win that round. So it could be a grammar lesson. Whoever types in the correct spelling of a word. Whoever types in, in history, who was the leader of Italy in 1942 during World War II, and whoever types that in correctly first will automatically, get the point. So different ways of engaging, but again, it makes it kind of fun and lighthearted. One of the other options we offer is potluck, where it'll actually go through and randomly pick a student. This works extremely well, by the way, in grade school and middle school, because when you turn all the audio on, you actually hear dice rolling throughout the class. So you hear this kind of dice roll from device to device. You see screens flash on the student's screen, and then automatically it picks someone. And again, it's a way of keeping them engaged, and nobody can just zone out. Nobody can just sit along the sidelines and not participate, because it could randomly pick anyone at any time. And it really does keep students kind of on the edge of their seat. A couple of other features we offer is around this website restrictions. So I mentioned that at a more granular level, by class, by lesson, by day, I can determine what website you have access to in my class. So maybe for today's lesson, I want you to have access to Khan Academy, a Wikipedia page, and that's it. And nothing else can you have access to. So I can say just those 3 websites are all you have access to. So even though the school may say 100 websites, these are the only ones that will actually load on your system. Anytime you try to go to a website that's not on the approved list, it'll actually come up and tell you that website's been blocked, and then show you the 3 websites that you have access to. Or I can say, for right now, based on what we're working on, there is 0 reason you need to be able to go to any website or the internet. I'm going to restrict all, and I can do that at the click of a button. And then I can actually restrict all internet access during my lesson. So if it's a test, if it's other things you don't want them to be able to look up, you can actually block that internet access. Again, you can do the same thing with applications. So you can block what applications are running. So you can have a list of approved applications or a list of blocked applications. And then if they're running an application, let's say before they even got into class, again as an example, Minecraft, they started it before the class started. As soon as they come into class, you're going to see what running applications they have up here. So you would see in this list the running applications. All you would have to do is right-click on that application, click on Close, and you actually close that application for them. So again, they're not able to use applications or be distracted by the device while you're trying to teach. One of the most powerful components of HP Classroom Manager is this concept of real-time formative assessment. So thinking again around mathematics, typically when you go through a math lesson, you go through a couple of problems together as a class, and then usually by the 3rd problem, you write up that problem up on the board, and then you ask students who can answer this equation. And studies show if you're a really good teacher and you're having a really good day, maybe 20% of your class will raise their hand. That means 80% aren't participating in the class. Now, that doesn't mean 80% don't understand, but they're not participating. But through doing a real-time formative survey or a formative assessment, you're going to get a look from everyone in your class. So what you can do is you can either have questions kind of pre-written attached to your lesson plan, or you can come up with a question on the fly and just type it in and then throw out a few answers. But let's say it was a math class and I want to see, see the equation on the board. Here's the possible answers to that equation. I'm going to go ahead and send that out. And then when I send that out, every student gets a pop-up. And they're going to have to select an answer. Now, they're going to have to think about it. They're going to select which answer it is. Some of them may say it's number 1. Some of them may say it's 199. Some of them may say it's 32. But they submit whatever that answer is, and then you as the teacher get an answer back from them to see are they really understanding what I've just covered or not. And this can be used, again, throughout any of the disciplines, not just mathematics, but you can do it in history. You can put it in chemistry and list out different compounds and different elements on the table. But you can actually, show this information, have it pre-written, push it out, and then have the students answer it. If they all get it, let's say 90% of the class gets it, you have a couple who didn't, you can continue on with your lesson knowing that you may have to work a little extra with a couple of your students. Let's say 85 or 90% of the class didn't get it, they got it wrong. You don't want to keep moving forward with the lesson and struggling through. Now's the perfect time to go back and revisit your lesson so that you can kind of revisit and try to get them all up to speed. The last thing certainly that you want to do is wait until the end of the week quiz or the end of the chapter test to find out that your students are struggling all along the way. So real-time formative assessment is really powerful to be able to do that. And again, you can have these questions written ahead of time, attached to a lesson plan, so that you just click through them as you're going through your lesson. Here's question number 1 I'm going to push out, here's question number 2, and so forth. So you don't even have to take the time to type them in while you're going through class. Or if you come up with a really great question, that kind of got spawned by communication in the class, then obviously you can type in one and throw it out there. But it's really important, and it's really very powerful to get that formative assessment. A couple of additional things we allow the teacher to do: they can control print jobs at the actual student level. So what printers do students have access to, and then are they even allowed to print? So you can block all printing, you can pause printing, you can make sure that they only print one copy and not multiple copies. So you have that kind of capability. You have the capability, again, of having these kind of chat interactions and monitoring those chat interactions. So any kind of chat going either one-to-one between students through the tool or in kind of a group forum situation, again, you have the ability to monitor that, jump back and forth between those communications, and kind of keep spurring out the ideas, but also allowing the students to collaborate together. And then as it's monitoring the activity, I'm going to jump down a couple, you can actually have target keywords that it's monitoring in real time. So as the students are typing, you can actually have it alert you when they've hit certain keywords. So again, a positive example would be grammar words. You can have your top 20 grammar words, and as they're typing them, it's going to tell you how many they've hit and spelled correctly. But then from the inappropriate word side, and this is the unfortunate reality I think that we all live in today, is if you see things like bullying happening, and you see things like sexting or harassment or any of those kind of negative things happening, threats certainly going on, you would be able to have inappropriate words that you're looking for. So as the student types that, it's actually going to alert you as the teacher that that's going on. You can then come in, understand what the context of those words were being used, and then obviously take appropriate action. But again, it's a way of making sure that your students are safe, you're safe, and your school is protected. A couple of other features is the ability to control if you have access to the CD or DVD drive and what kind of access. Same kind of access for your USB. So if somebody brings in a thumb drive, you don't want them to be able to automatically execute a program on that thumb drive. That's a way of viruses getting spread, so you'd be able to restrict that. And you can mute and unmute everyone's sound or an individual sound. So if it's a lesson that you want them to have audio on and they put their headphones on, you obviously unmute their sound. But as soon as that part of the lesson's done, you don't want to be disrupted by all the dings and notifications and so forth that PCs do. You can actually mute everyone's sound so you can continue to move on with the lesson. And then last but not least is this concept of a interactive virtual whiteboard. And this interactive virtual whiteboard is the ability to kind of share out graphically ideas with students or in between students and teachers. So another prime example would be math lesson, right? So you may put up an equation on the board and then you pass off this marker to a student and say, okay, draw out what you think that's going to graph out. And so you pass them the virtual marker, and they say, oh, I think it's going to graph out as this. And then another student raises their hand and goes, no, 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 I think it's going to be something different. So you pass them the marker, and they say, nope, I think it's going to graph more like this. And this is obviously where true learning and education happens, because now you have some students who think this way, you have other students who think this way. Now you open up that conversation, right? You open up that dialogue. Why do you think this? Why do you think that? and then you start to actually get true education and learning in the classroom. So the interactive virtual whiteboard could either be shared around all of the students in class. Each individual group, if you've broken them up into groups, can have their own whiteboard, or you can even give a whiteboard to every student and allow them to come up with an idea. They can do things like paint. They can insert a text box. They can actually edit and insert an image. So if they've taken a picture or found a picture from the internet and they want to put it into their presentation on the whiteboard, they can do that, and allows them the capability of doing that. And I've seen some of these get extremely creative as they're presenting that out. So that's another feature that we offer, again, to allow students to collaborate and express themselves in different ways. So these are the basic features of HP Classroom Manager. One other one I want to show is around this quick launch capability. So I mentioned that you can actually remote launch a website or remote launch an application. So all you have to do is either have that attached to your lesson plan ahead of time, or you can create one. But then all you have to do is double click on it. It goes out to that student's device. It launches up that application or that website, and then immediately gets them there so that you don't have to wait for them and you can proceed on with your lesson. So again, very easy way of being able to manage the devices in your class. So I know we're almost out of time, and I do want to open this up for additional questions, and if no additional questions, then I know David has a little bit more information. So any questions on anything you've seen so far?
The question, I guess, is a follow-up to the one that I asked before you went into the demo presentation.
Okay.
And that just was, what was the name of that MDM software that you talked about for limiting settings on an iPad?
There's actually several out there, so and I don't want to right now recommend one over the other per se, but what I would recommend doing is when you look on the iPad and under the iTunes Store, you can look for mobile device management, and you'll actually see several out there. I know Apple actually is coming out with their own MDM as well, to be able to allow you to configure devices and set kind of global settings on devices, but also prohibit access to things like changing settings and prohibit access to some applications as an example.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure that we follow up with the person that's been asking that question.
Certainly. And offline, I can give you some recommendations. I want to be just careful because right now we're talking to a couple of these as potential partners, and so I want to make sure that we kind of protect that anonymity right at the moment.
Okay. I think I can take control back. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you so much for spending our lunch hour. I'm not sure. I think you're in Colorado, so this is probably just before your lunchtime. But I really do appreciate you coming online and giving that presentation to us.
Not a problem.
So just quickly, I just wanted to be able to share with everyone a little bit about PKA. So for about 20 years, PKA has supplied enterprise IT solutions within the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. And we work with both commercial customers, but more importantly, we work with public sector clients, both local municipalities, as well as the K through 12 schools and some higher education institutions as well. We are members of a number of advisory councils, just to give you an idea of how highly regarded PKA is with some of the partners and vendors that you may use, Intel, Hewlett Packard, and Red Hat, to name a few of where we participate. We're also an authorized partner on the New York OGS contracts for the entire HP product line, as well as the New Jersey WSCA contracts. And these partnerships with these leading vendors really uniquely enable us to look at your infrastructure and come up with a simple solution for some of your complex challenges. Part of that is the fact that we're an HP Platinum partner. And this means that our engineering staff has achieved the highest levels of technical certifications. And I think it's our commitment to training our staff, along with our internal drive to provide excellent service, that really puts us at that level. So I do thank again Charlie for attending. I thank you for attending, and I'll make sure that our team is going to follow up with you. Let me just show you some of our team members. I'll make sure that our team follows up with you to talk more about Classroom Manager and PKA solutions. So thank you again. I will send a link out to everyone with this slide set, and more importantly, a recording of this event so that you have access to the live demo that Charlie provided. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.